Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. Breaking news, in fact, a ton of breaking news to share with you today. We've had two nova explosions be observed in the night sky. We've also just had two magnitude 6+ earthquakes strike Venezuela back to back. One was a magnitude 6.2, the other a 6.3, and in fact also a magnitude 5.8 aftershock. And right during this time frame of all of this, we had a coronal mass ejection sweep by and hit interstellar object 3I Atlas. In addition to this, our sun is quite active with quite a few sunspots, 165. Solar flux is over 180. And so it looks like we are building up in energy as we approach October and November. And it is those 2 months where we really have a lot of dynamic qualities, especially as it relates to interstellar object 3I Atlas. It'll be performing its closest approach to Mars on the 3rd. It gets very close to Mars, less than 0.2 astronomical units, and then it'll perform a superior conjunction with Earth on the 21st of October. Also, comet C2025 R2 Swan will be the closest it will approach to Earth, about 0.25 astronomical units away, on the same date of October 21st. Then on the 29th, we have the perihelion of 3I Atlas. And well, now we have two nova explosions in the night sky. And these are V7994 Sagittarii and then also V1935 Centauri. And it is that second one that was actually discovered first, but they're both picked up by the same amateur astronomer, Dr. John Seach, on September 23rd, and it's Centauri that there's been actually quite a few other measurements taken of it. It blasted off a bunch of gamma rays, also a lot of hard X-rays were observed from this nova explosion, now visible to the naked eye in the southern hemisphere, whereas V7994 Sagittarii is just outside range of the naked eye, though you can pick it up with long exposure photography, maybe a pair of binoculars. But we had two nova explosions, as you may remember, back in July. That was very dynamic, and we saw some climatic shifts afterwards. There's some evidence there as to how novas and or more likely supernovas may influence the climate of the Earth. Very tenuous data and it's speculatory, but I'll link my podcast conversation that I had with Raymond on this. He really outlines the data nicely on that. So now two new nova explosions. We had these two magnitude 6+ earthquakes in Venezuela during the earthquake watch that we forecasted on the channel back just a few days ago. Because of the space weather conditions, we had anomalously low solar wind density after a coronal hole high-speed stream impact, and they both popped off during that time frame. And those are the biggest earthquakes to have ruptured since the magnitude 7.8 earthquake in Russia back on the 18th of September. So a lot has been happening, all this combining together. We do have some new imagery of 3I Atlas taken on September 15th by a more professional installation, really big telescope. It's showing an anti-sunward tail, whereas all the amateur astronomers taking photos of 3I Atlas are showing a tail in the sunward direction. So there's some disparity between the two. That's quite odd. And now with this impact of this coronal mass ejection to 3I Atlas once more, we had some back in July that I talked about. Right after it was discovered, we had a whole bunch of stuff launched towards 3I Atlas. It then seemed to expand its coma to a much greater degree from July to August, getting closer to the sun, but also perhaps due to ionization from this solar impact. Well, we have that happening right now, and or it just happened. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens to 3I Atlas there. All that and much more to cover in today's video. Now quickly before we get into it, if you're wondering what this t-shirt that I'm wearing is that says Interstellar 3I Atlas, well, this is some official channel merch that is available to everyone in the United States. www.earthevolution.com/store is the website. It has this amazing artwork on the back by my dad. He painted that many years ago. He's a natural soil pigment artist. And so we took that and we put it on this Interstellar 3I Atlas long sleeve. It's super comfortable, has a great design. It's not too crazy, which is really nice. He just picked up his and he's like, it's great, super comfortable. Fits well. I have to agree. I love mine. It's like my uniform now, you could say. And so this is available small to double XL on the website. There are other products as well. The Boom Shakalaka shirt here. A lot of all organic herbal tea blends that we make and mix ourselves. Some other clothing and crystals and more. And there will be some new shirts coming out. I have a design right now in my head that I'm going to do a mock-up on and hopefully get that on the website soon. So all that and more at www.earthevolution.com/store. And I offer all these things at the fairest prices for you. So this is a mutually beneficial thing. If you pick up something, you're getting a great value for what you're getting, especially with the tea blends. They're awesome, and all the shirts are 100% natural fiber, either organic and or linen. And also it helps the channel out. It helps me keep doing this. So I offer these to really help you with your health and wellness, and also just to have some fun. I love this 3i Atlas shirt, and well, it seems to be getting more and more dynamic by the day because of this coronal mass ejection impact. Let's check it out. Here we have a NASA space weather model, and I've added in interstellar object 3i Atlas and its movement through the inner solar system to this model. Now I'm going to hit play on this, but I have it paused right now so you can see this coronal mass ejection there and its impact on 3i Atlas. This is just a model. It's not reflective of reality 100%, but this is a pretty bang bang easy thing to do. They see the coronal mass ejection launch out and they figure out its velocity, and well, the timing is less important than the fact that it's going in that direction. So let's hit play. Let's watch this. We'll see interstellar object 3i Atlas coming very, very quick to the inner solar system. Again, going to have that closest approach to Mars, less than 0.2 astronomical units on the 3rd. We're gonna have a lot of new information on 3i Atlas after October 3rd. I will keep you up to date, so please subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with that and everything else, like solar activity, earthquakes, these nova explosions. That's what we cover on the channel. What is happening here on our planet instead of all the junk that they feed you in the news. And that's what, we don't want any of that. So this is coming in really quick. It's getting hit basically by the meat of that coronal mass ejection. And the thing is, it was hit by a lot of coronal mass ejections back in July, and kind of like late July. Well, it was further out. So the further out a coronal mass ejection goes, the more it expands and the lower the density gets, and it's going to be a weaker impact. Now that it's by Mars, that coronal mass ejection is going to hit it fairly strongly. It's not the biggest one ever. It's not like some mega solar storm impact, but it's definitely notable. And so it's going to undergo some changes as a result of that. We have this large coma of dust, gas, and plasma surrounding it. You can't have gas and dust in space without there being plasma. It's crazy to me that there are all these astronomers and people talking about comets and things like 3i Atlas, and they only ever will say dust and gas, whereas we know that in space, most things are ionized. 99.9% of the universe is made up of plasma, and some percentage of that gas coma surrounding 3i Atlas is actually going to be plasma due to solar radiation and also these plasma influences and just ionization due to those interactions from the solar wind and or things like this coronal mass ejection impact. What we also find is that when you do have a gas ionized, those electrons being very mobile will fly off to those dust grains and stick to them. And therefore that is going to slow the recombination rate of those electrons back to some other like cation, let's say like a proton. You have a hydrogen that splits and let's say it becomes a proton and electron. Well, if the electron zips over to a dust grain and in fact the proton also eventually connects to a dust grain, well, that recombination is going to be harder to do. So this is not only dust and gas, but it's also a lot of plasma. And now we have this big plasma structure from the sun sweeping by, and we see what happens when these sort of things impact Earth. We have geomagnetic storms, there's aurora, electric currents start propagating through the surface of the Earth. We see when solar storms impact Mars, which does not have a magnetic field like the Earth. It creates an induced magnetic field from that solar wind influence traveling around the planet. It does have a very weak atmosphere. When we see these solar wind impacts around Venus, we get the same thing. So there is a ton of dynamicism to our solar system because of the sun and its constant emission of solar wind and solar storms and light radiation and more. And 3i Atlas coming in from deep interstellar space for who knows how long, finally now receiving a jolt of energy from a very close flyby along the ecliptic plane for a long duration of time. So this is happening right now, basically on the 25th of September. Maybe it's like kind of the solar storm impacts already flown by the past 8-12 hours or so. But effectively, it's happening right now before this closest approach to Mars. It's going to be really interesting to see how this evolves. But I find it very interesting that right before this impact, we had 2 nova explosions be picked up in the sky. And then also yesterday, we had 2 magnitude 6+ earthquakes strike Venezuela, same location, back to back. So something clearly is happening. Let us talk about these 2 big earthquakes that struck Venezuela yesterday. Magnitude 6.2, and then a few hours later, a 6.3, nearly the same location. And these are the biggest earthquakes that we have had since that magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck off the coast of Kamchatka, Russia. And well, it happened during our space weather earthquake watch that was issued here on the channel just a couple days ago. So we saw this coronal hole high-speed stream impact the Earth. Solar wind density dropped anomalously low. That's something that we've been tracking. It seems to very well correlate with significant earthquakes. And well, lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. And so these were land-based earthquakes. We see them right here. We can set this to show only earthquakes on the map. And there is our 6.2. That occurred at 22:21 Universal Time on the 24th. And these hours are important because we're going to look at the solar wind. Here it was at 03:51 a.m. Universal Time on the 25th for the 6.3 that followed. And then also a 5.8. So this could be the entire sequence there, but there could also perhaps be more. That 5.8 as an aftershock is pretty close to the highest magnitude of this bunch, which is a 6.3, and the 6.3 and 6.2 are nearly identical. So we could be looking at something bigger happening there in the near future. That's possible. If we go to our largest magnitude earthquakes, this is for the past week, we see that these are the biggest earthquakes since the 18th there. And that was that 7.8 that struck off the coast of Kamchatka. And well, that also happened directly after a coronal hole high-speed stream impact. And we also put out an earthquake watch for that. So there really seems to be something with this drop in solar wind density creating a bit of a greater like vacuum influence around the planet. And then the Earth, my hypothesis is that the Earth kind of expands into that. And that's why we get these faults to rupture. So we've had 2 big earthquakes there. We can look at this with this video here, and I'll hit play so we can see both of these propagate out. You'll see the waves. They're almost identical, but we see that it ruptured there in Venezuela, and here we see the waves ripple across North America and the seismic network, Mexico, United States, and Canada going all the way up to Alaska. And it's just interesting that these 2 earthquakes were so close in magnitude. They are effectively identical, and they happen back to back within less than about 6 hours or so. So we just had that influence hit South America, and there is some historic seismicity for this area in general, and more like this zone right there, and then also in this zone, but specifically for that area, these are the biggest earthquakes that have occurred since at least the year 2000. That's what I set the historic range for. So definitely notable earthquakes on land. And if we look, this 6.2 was pretty shallow at 7.8 kilometers. And then the 6.3 afterwards, nearly the same location, was deeper. So it was almost like we had the 6.2 up top, and then that energy going down caused a bit of a rupture and expansion from that 6.3 right afterwards. There was that kind of, you can think about it in that sense, both spatially and temporally. So very, very interesting. And that 5.8 there, is leading me to think that there is a chance that we get something bigger from this. One of these historic earthquakes off to the side, we can see that with this map here, again, going back to January 1st of the year 2000, and that was a 7.3. So that's a big earthquake. That was August 21st of 2018, and we see all the other magnitude 6 earthquakes and 6 whatever, because I set this for magnitude 6 and greater. So we could get something bigger in that area. We definitely can't rule it out. So keep a close eye on Venezuela. And another interesting thing, and I'm not saying I believe this is speculation. Some people do believe this, but it's an interesting trend, is that these earthquakes are occurring in these zones where the United States is currently having geopolitical tension with, okay? Because we had the big magnitude 8.8 earthquake here right around the time of that visit between Trump and Putin. And there was just a lot of earthquake activity because of that whole tension dynamic building between the two countries. And then we had that visit. And then also there's been a lot of tension between Venezuela and the United States. And now we have these two magnitude 6+ earthquakes here. So some people think that the United States has an earthquake weapon and that this is actually like a covert thing that we use to influence different countries around the world. I'm not saying that's the case, but I do find it very interesting that there seems to be a resonance between where the Earth is having these earthquakes and where there's also geopolitical tension. And if I had to give my thoughts on that, I would say that both of them are resonating with a deeper archetypal layer of consciousness and understanding that's manifesting these themes to deal with, and it's really just a result of that playing out. But that is a very interesting thing, that a lot of earthquakes in Russia, now some big earthquakes in Venezuela, both areas that the United States has some geopolitical tension with. And now let's talk about these two new nova explosions, which were just discovered in the past couple of days by Dr. John Seach. He's an interesting guy. He's an astrophysicist, also into space weather, volcanoes, and more. So yeah, cool dude it looks like. And he found these while doing some nighttime astronomy. Here we see his image for Sagittarii, and this is V7994. And then we also see his image there of V1935 Centauri. So both of these discoveries have been confirmed, and the magnitude at discovery for Sagittarii was 6.2, which is just outside visual detection, but perhaps it brightens a little bit in the next couple of days, because that's what happened with Centauri. Its magnitude, apparent magnitude, was 10.2 at discovery, brightened to 8.2 when you wrote that post, and now it's actually around 5.8. So that's just within range of visible detection. So that's visible in the southern hemisphere. I guess there are people picking that up with the naked eye. And so we have these two nova explosions happening when we have all these comets flying in. Interstellar object 3I Atlas, the third ever, seems to be much bigger than expected and has these very anomalous properties as it relates to its gas coma and all the observations of it. It's kind of like a shape-shifting chameleon, right? Sometimes it has an anti-sunward tail, other times it has this push of material in the sunward direction. It's very bizarre. So a lot happening in our solar system right now. We can go here to see the actual official kind of list for this. So here are the two detections right there. And if we go specifically to these, we can get some more information. I'll link all this plus some other things in the video description for you guys to read. But there's a whole write-up there. We can see that's now approximately 5.8 in its magnitude, and other people are starting to get confirmation of it. But it was also picked up by some of the other installations like Fermi and Swift, and they measure gamma rays and X-rays. And so this appears to have been a pretty bright nova. And we think it's binary, like we kind of have in general, or I don't want to say we, but in general it seems that things will be categorized into buckets maybe a little too early. A nova is when you have a binary star system, two stars orbiting each other, and one of them will accumulate material from the other star and then blast it off. And that's what causes that sudden brightening of light that we often pick up. A supernova is some sort of process that causes a star to explode. And then that can be really energetic. Whereas a nova kind of has a cap and limit on how energetic it is. A supernova can be really wild. So the fact that V1935 Centauri has brightened so much after discovery. I'm like, maybe it's a nova, maybe not. I'm not the expert here, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually some other factor, because a lot of these were previously undiscovered. We didn't really like have any sights on them, and then all of a sudden it happened. So how can we really say it's a nova? Maybe I'm out of my element here. But regardless, we also see the information here for Sagittarii. I just find it interesting that we get two back-to-back. Then we get the two earthquakes in Venezuela, and we also have this coronal mass ejection hit 3I Atlas as it starts to enter into the inner solar system, getting close to Mars. So we have all these comets. Traditionally, comets are seen as omens and heralds of change and fated events, and now we're getting these nova explosions in the sky, and 3I Atlas is extremely anomalous and bizarre, and a lot of people have been connecting to it and seems to be interacting with the Earth, the solar system, the sun, humanity consciously. This is up for you to do some more research into and perhaps even feel into yourself. But it just is like so many factors piling on top of one another. The Earth is shaking and rumbling, stars are exploding, comets are flying in, and then we have the big unknown factor of 3I Atlas. We also have some new imagery of 3I Atlas taken on September 15th by the Large Monolithic Imager at the Lowell Discovery Telescope. This is how I found this information. This is Astronomer's Telegram, and there's just always new updates. For example, you can just hit next, and you'll see that there's another one, and there will be related articles if they are connected together. So I'll link this and also some other Astronomer Telegram links in the video description. The others are for the Centauri nova explosion. But we have some new imagery here, and so we can check that out. And it shows 3I Atlas in quite some good detail, better than most of these amateur astronomer photos, though they have it kind of like in black and white. But usually the amateur astronomers just don't have these massive, massive telescope arrays. And so specifically in this telegram, they're talking about the carbon-nitrogen morphology, or just CN. And we see here 3I Atlas. That's the location of it. And we see the direction of the sun. This is the icon for the sun. So we see that this is the sunward direction like this. This is showing an anti-sunward tail. So I find it very interesting that all of the big telescope arrays are picking up an anti-sunward tail, though it definitely is not a tail like you typically see with the comet, which is really long, stretched out, has this beautiful filamentary kind of dendritic network to it. Instead, they're showing just kind of like this bulbous gas cloud around it, then a little bit of a tail stretching out. And then the amateur astronomers are picking up the opposite. They're seeing it push out in front. So I don't know what the deal is. But we can see that factor right here. And then we also see the gas cloud. So here we see the coma a bit more. And they estimate that this is about 100,000 kilometers in length. And then you see that this gas coma is quite big as well, and probably even greater in its radius. So it depends on how you look at it, but they're looking specifically at CN. So it looks like the carbon dioxide coma is the largest, but it also has quite a large CN coma as well. And then there's, of course, all the dust and the plasma that we discussed. But this is the latest imagery that we have of 3I Atlas from a big array taken in September. All the others go back to August. And so it's good that we have this data point, and it'll be really interesting now, again, as I've said, to see what happens with 3I Atlas after this most recent coronal mass ejection impact that has either just occurred or it's happening right now. And here we see the light curve for interstellar object 3I Atlas provided by COBS, and I reported on the sudden brightening of 3I Atlas a few videos back. My last big 3I Atlas video, it brightened about 20 times because of how it jumped from about 16 in apparent magnitude to about 12. That's about a 20 times increase. Each jump of 1 is 2.54 times greater. So you do the math, it's about 20 times. And well, it hasn't gone back down to this expected light curve. So it's staying elevated. And now at this coronal mass ejection impact, perhaps it brightens even more. It's gonna be really interesting to see what happens. But that trend change is still in effect for 3I Atlas as it relates to its brightness. And we'll wrap up by going to our energy analytics portal at earthevolution.com/energy-analytics, where you can see a whole bunch of different things at once. For example, we have our Schumann Resonances, our 0 to 40 hertz vertical electric field as observed out of Tomsk, Russia. We've been seeing a big increase in our background electromagnetic field there due to atmospheric activity. We're having this big kind of atmospheric river sweep over. That's why we're getting this increase in the Schumann resonances. Here we see our global seismic activity level. This is at magnitude 8.8 megaquake. Then we've seen some other magnitude 7s. That's at 7.8 there that just occurred. And this yellow bar is for those 2 magnitude 6 earthquakes. You'll see how they don't add up to like a 7. Because a magnitude 6.2, 6.3, you add them together, that's about the energy of a 6.4 or maybe a 6.5 magnitude earthquake. So that's how that scales, but still significant double burst. And if we go all the way down, we will see our sunspots. So here we can check out what's been happening with our sunspots for the past 2 days. And you'll notice that there's a lot of sunspots on the sun. We spiked up to 200 right about here. And now it's back down to around 165, 10.7 centimeter radial flux. That's a 2.8 gigahertz frequency. That is about 185 solar flux units right now. So our SFUs have also been going up. Just that overall radiative influence from the sun and the radio frequency spectrum has been increasing. And that's mainly because there are more sunspots on the sun. Each one of these is a little magnetic vortex. It's actually not tiny because each one of these is about the size of the Earth, approximately. So these are big structures on the sun as it relates to our planet. Let's not forget that. And we see that right here, this is the most active area on the sun in terms of sunspots. So it looked a bit busier about 2 days ago, and maybe it's closing up a little bit since then. But we had a whole bunch of sunspots, Earth facing. They are now rotating out. It's gonna be really interesting to see if anything rotates in, because the sun does seem to be getting more active with a kind of a second hump, you could say, in activity for solar cycle 25. The 2024 was more active than this year thus far. But if that is the case, then we're gonna see new sunspots get created, and not necessarily just these ones being the only areas of disturbance on the sun rotating by every month or so. So I would not be surprised if these rotate out and actually we get new ones to kind of come out and emerge, especially because we have 3i Atlas getting closer and closer and all these other comets, and they seem to trigger changes in the sun, whether this is like sunspot growth or whether it's solar flares and coronal mass ejections. I can't say that conclusively or anything, but you just go through the record of close flybys of comets or even objects like Oumuamua, which wasn't a comet, it was like more an asteroid or something, right? It had no coma, it was very bizarre. They seem to be linked up with solar activity when it's during solar maximum or the descending phase. If it's complete solar minimum, we don't see that activity. That's because the sun's like, yeah, I'm not doing it. But we are right now in solar maximum. So that is also the big story that we have for October and November. I think there's going to be quite a lot of solar activity those 2 months. The Russell-McFerrin effect will be in play. This is where Earth overall just pulls more energy out of the solar wind, and geomagnetic storms can be stronger than they would be otherwise, like during solstice. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But everything is very, very dynamic, and now we just had 2 nova explosions. So we just had a big burst of gamma rays and X-rays and everything else come into our inner solar system. In fact, the entire solar system. And so it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens there. But remember, back in July when we had those 2 nova explosions, it was just days afterwards that we had that magnitude 8.8 megaquake. So yeah. Things are wild right now. I'll keep you up to date every step of the way. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, I've been your host, Stefan Burns. If you'd like to stay up to date with Earth, Sun, Cosmos, consciousness, and more, I'm your guy, your cosmic bro. And we also have the fun merch to wear too. Again, the Interstellar Atlas shirt is available at www.earthevolution.com/store. Hope you check that out, and more stuff coming. So wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. Make sure you go outside, ground yourself, spend some time in nature, go for a swim in the ocean if you have that possibility. That'll really help you stay calm, cool, collected, and to approach this fall with a lot of oomph and energy, because now is the time to get going. So thank you so much. I'll see you all in the next video.